Professor Davis here. We are going to dive in and look at population and community interactions and a little bit of ecology in this chapter. We're going to kind of focus in a couple of areas. The first one's going to be looking at kind of demographics and populations. We're then going to dive into this predator-prey type of interaction. We're going to then look at learning and innate behaviors, so animal behavior, and then we're going to look at how these organisms sometimes live in like a society. So this is going to be in kind of three kind of main parts. So let's dive into our first part here. So our first part is going to look at demographics and dynamics. And so looking here, populations are going to be dynamic entities, meaning they change. There's going to be movement that happens based on a number of different factors. These factors could include seasonal changes. Okay, so changes from winter to spring, spring to summer. It can change the demographics. We also see that natural disasters and weather patterns and things like that could affect the area and the individuals who live there. Competition, because resources tend to be limited most of the time. And so because of that, that could drive changes within the community. Individuals who really want to study this stuff, they look at the statistical analysis of these populations. They are going to go into what we call demography. So they're going to look at the demography and we're going to see how they end up changing. Populations are characterized by a number of things. First, they are characterized by their size. So how many total individuals are living in that particular area? We then look at the density. So how big is the area? So are they compacted in a very tight cluster area, or are they able to spread out? So not only are we looking at the number, we're also kind of looking at how compact they are. Okay, and so we have size and we have density. So let's talk about some of this distribution with the density that we could see. So species distribution patterns are how they live within their habitat. Okay, how are they living together and cohabitating in that space? So individuals within a population could be distributed randomly. And you can see that here in this picture A, where it's just random. Sometimes they're clumped together. Sometimes they have more space. It's random. And plants are notorious for this. Okay. The next one is clumped. These are when organisms live in a group. So if they live in like a herd or a flock or a school, you would see that they're going to have this idea of living with a group, and they're going to be clumped in their distribution. The last group is uniform. In this particular case, you'll notice that they all have a similar space. They're equally spaced apart, and a lot of times we see this with birds, especially when they're nesting, and they want to stay just far enough away from the next bird to protect their young. All right, they don't want the birds around them to affect them, but they still want the safety in numbers. And so this is going to be more of a uniform type of distribution. The next thing we want to look at are what we call the life tables. Life tables provide information about the life history of an organism. It looks at things like their life expectancy at each of the ages and also their mortality rate. We see that these life tables do contribute to something called the survivorship curve. And I'm going to show you a picture of what that looks like in just a minute. But it's a graph of the number of individuals surviving at each age interval. Okay, and it's related to the time frame. We do see that it allows for comparisons between different populations, and there are three types. So organisms fall into one of these three types of survivorship curves. The first curve is the type 1. This is where their mortality rate is low early on and middle years, and it occurs mostly in the older individuals. These guys produce very few offspring, so they don't produce very many offspring, and they also, though, provide really good care to their offspring. In the type 2, we see the mortality is relatively consistent through their entire lifespan. So there's not a time where you see mortality rates increase. It's pretty much the same through their entire life. And then type 3 is when early ages have the highest mortality rate. There's a lot less of them that make it to the advanced years. But if they do make it to the advanced years, they live for a really long time. They produce large number of offspring with little to no care. So if you look, we as humans are the type 1 curve, all right? And so we do see that we pour a lot of time and effort into the individuals early on in life, and we hope that they survive, and then we see the decrease with age that occurs. The bottom is the opposite. This would be seen with like trees, insects, fish. They lay a bunch of eggs or they have a bunch of seeds, hoping that at least some of them survive. And so you'll notice a lot of them don't, but if they do, they can live for a really long time. Type 2 is in the middle and it's like a straight line. This shows you that the mortality is the same throughout the entire life. And the example here in this picture are birds. The next thing we want to look at is the growth and regulation. There's 2 types of growth that can happen within a community, and there's one main difference that contributes to which one it is. The first one is the exponential growth. This is an early pattern of accelerating population size, and this can occur in the next growth too that we're going to see. The thing is here, this is going to happen when there are abundant resources. There's a ton of resources available, so growth can happen really fast within this population. It has a J shape to its curve. You can see that here in the picture. But guys, this can only continue if resources are infinite, meaning they're not limited. So as long as resources are present and they keep coming, this will continue. The problem is in nature, resources are limited. You only have so much. So this doesn't actually happen that often where it can sustain this. That leads us to the second type of growth. This is what we call the logistic growth. This is where we do see the exponential growth at the very beginning, but then because we start to reach these limited resources, we reach something called the carrying capacity. This is the maximum amount of individuals that environment can sustain. All right, because again, resources are limited. This causes a struggle of existence with the members of the population. So exponential growth does occur at the beginning, but we do see that as resources are depleted, we start to see a plateau take place at that carrying capacity. This creates an S-shaped curve. So it's a little bit different in its shape, but also in its purpose, because it shows that resources are limited. Well, what are some of these resources? So population growth is regulated in a variety of ways, and some of these resources or factors are known as density dependent, and others are known as density independent. So if we look at density dependent factors, these are the factors that you would see that would affect that curve that we saw. These are going to be where as the density of the population grows, okay, it's going to change the rate of the mortality. Factors of this nature are biological, okay? This includes predation, predator-prey interactions. It could be inter and intra-specific competition. So in other words, competition between members of the same group or competition between members of my group and a different group, okay? So they could be competing. Another one are parasites. If a disease or parasite comes into a large population, you're going to start to see deaths pretty big, especially if they live in a social group. On the other hand, other factors are what we call density independent, meaning it doesn't matter how many individuals are there. It could be an individual group of 5 or 500. It doesn't care. These cause mortality in the population regardless of how many people or organisms are present. These factors are normally physical in nature. So this includes like weather, natural disasters, pollution. They affect the population. Okay, natural disasters don't come through and be like, man, that population's already pretty small. I'm going to leave them alone. No, that tornado doesn't care. It just goes through the area. And it affects that population, maybe even making it smaller in the process. All right, so you have density dependent and you have density independent. There are also 2 types of species that we need to talk about that are found in these populations. One is the K-selected species. K-selected species are adapted to more stable, predictable environments. They tend to exist close to their carrying capacity. So they get up there very close to that limited resource range. They tend to have large but fewer offspring. And because of this, they do also contribute large amounts of resources to their kids, to their offspring. All right, so these are K-selected species. On the other hand, R-selected species are adapted to the more unstable and unpredictable environments. These guys are going to have large numbers of offspring, and they do not provide a large resource of parental care. So they do not take care of their young. They don't invest in them like the K-selected species do. Okay, so the R-selected species are going to be the more unfavorable conditions, lots of offspring, sort of thing. All right, so let's talk about some of the vocabulary. So these are going to be words that are obviously going to be important, and you're going to see them over and over again throughout pretty much the rest of the semester. So we have species. Species can interbreed to produce offspring. Okay, and specifically we want to talk about viable offspring, offspring that can then also have offspring. Okay, because in nature, remember, success is not just surviving, it's also passing on your genes. The population is the members of the same species occupying the same area. Okay, so they live in the same area, same species. A society is a population that shows cooperative behavior. So they work together. And we're going to talk about society in these organisms a little bit later. Then you have community. Community are populations of species that are interacting together. So different species and how they interact. An ecosystem is the community, including the environment. So not only on how these organisms or living things interact, how do those things also interact with, say, the water source or shelter or the weather? All these abiotic factors, the non-living factors. So biotic are the living things, abiotic are the non-living things. Now, all of this is under the umbrella of ecology. Ecology is the study of the interactions of organisms with each other and with their environment. So ecology is going to study all of these aspects. So let's take a look at how we expand out, because this is a hierarchy. So if you take a look, this is a hierarchy. You start with the organism in the middle. The organism then is going to work with other individuals like themselves, same species, and they form a population. This population then is going to interact with other populations of different species, all living things, then that's going to create a community. The community is then going to interact with the non-living things, which are the abiotic, and that creates the ecosystem. All of this is part of planet Earth, which we call then the biosphere. All right, so living on planet Earth, we do see that a lot of these ecosystems tend to have lots of diversity. Now, diversity includes both species richness, so the number of different species in the area, as well as the abundance. What do the populations look like? Are they pretty large? Okay, so diversity is important in nature. We also see, though, we have to look at two things for these organisms. We need to look at their habitat, and we need to look at their niche. So a habitat, guys, is where the organism lives within the community. You can kind of think about it as its address. Where does it live? Does it live at the top of the trees? Does it live on the floor of the ocean? Is it going to be living in like the small shrubby areas? Does it live in a cave? That's its habitat. So aquatic, marine, arboreal being the trees, terrestrial, that's where it is located and lives. Okay, its address. The niche, however, is the role the organism plays in the community. What is its job? Okay, so habitat is its address, niche is its job or occupation. What does it do there? How does it interact with other animals as well as the habitat where it lives? Okay, that is the niche. So you'll see sometimes that a lot of things will live in the same address, like the same place, but their niche, their occupation will be different. Okay? If they live in the same place and they end up having the same job, the same niche, you're going to have competition that takes place, which is not good for the community. So let's talk about some concepts here. Competition for resources, predator-prey interactions, and also symbiotic relationships dynamically affect how the community is going to function in its structure that is present. All right, these things are going to influence that greatly. So some common community interactions are located here, and we're going to start first with competition. Competition is a rivalry due to limited resources. Now, these resources may be food, space, light, water, shelter, mates, and the list could go on. So there's a lot of different things that they could be competing for. Now, sometimes they compete within their own group, with their own species. Okay, a lion competing with another lion. We call that intra-specific competition. It's competition within their own group. On the other hand, sometimes the competition is between different organisms. So the lion and a hyena competing for the same food. They are different species, therefore this type of competition is inter-specific. Okay, so intra is within their own group, inter is between different groups. So again, some of these limited resources that they might be competing for are food, space, light, shelter, water, territory, mates. There's a lot of different things that they might be competing for. Now, one solution to avoid this competition, let's say an animal doesn't want to actually compete. Well, their biggest way to get around that is to move away. Go find a different habitat. Go get a different address. And so that is where they migrate out of that population. All right, so here are some examples of some different types of competition. You can see the competition between the same species here. We have competition between different species in the other two pictures, competing for water and probably competing for food at the very bottom. All right, so this is just showing you the different types of competition. The next thing we want to look at is this idea of niche and competition when it comes to a principle called the competitive exclusion principle. This states that no two similar species can occupy the same niche at the same time. So what does that mean? Well, guys, this means a lion and a tiger, if you'll notice, they have the same job in their habitat, their address, where they live. The thing is the lion and the tiger do not live in the same place. Okay, lions are going to live more in the savanna, whereas tigers are going to live more in the forest areas. So we see that they don't have an overlap, therefore they can have the same job. They just have the same job in different places. Okay, like different companies, different areas. Now, in a natural habitat, there is what we call partitioning of resources. A partitioning of resources is where we're putting them into like sections in order to help preserve the resources and the relationships. This reduces competition and it generates what we call niche specialization. All right, so this is kind of like if you use the example for doctors. When they first come in, they're all residents and then they become specialized. Some of them will be cardiovascular surgeons. Others are going to go into labor and delivery. So they get a specialization through the process. Partitioning of resources as well as this idea of specialization helps to prevent intense competition in the natural habitat. This allows the resources to be kind of spread out and used more evenly, and it also allows these organisms to coexist together. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to all live in the same area. All right, so this is going to bring us to then predation. So we talked about competition. Now let's talk about predation. Predation occurs when one organism feeds on another. Okay, the organism that feeds is called the predator, and the one that they feed on is called the prey. The efficiency of predation is related to the amount of prey available. If there's plenty of prey, the predator is going to be good at its job. If there's not, we may have some problems. How well do the predators adapt to capturing prey? So some predators have adaptations that help them. They could be camouflaged. They might be able to stalk their prey and pounce on it. They may have sharp teeth and claws to then grab it and hold on to it. It's whatever adaptations they have that help them be a very good predator. The control of prey populations. As a population of prey decreases, the amount of predation or predators also decreases. So we really have to watch this because it creates a kind of cycle. So when prey is up, predators go up. But then prey goes down, predators go down. Okay? As the population of prey increases, the amount of predation can also increase to a point. This is that idea of carrying capacity. Once the maximum potential to capture prey is reached, there no longer is an increase in the predation. Okay? This creates a predator-prey cycle. This cycle is going to be where populations of predators and prey are cyclic, meaning they move up and down together, okay, in a pattern. And these predator populations are always going to be smaller than the prey. So let me show you what I mean by this. So right here, this is showing you predator-prey dynamics of a hare and the lynx. So the hare is a type of rabbit, whereas the lynx is a type of small cat. The lynx is the predator and it eats the rabbit, the hare. But the hare is shown in red. If you'll notice, it's always higher than the light blue. This is because you need to have more prey than you have predators. The light blue is showing you the population of the predator. So when you notice that the prey goes up in the pink or red, then the predators then follow. When the prey starts to go down, the predators then follow. All right, and that's what we see happening with this cycle of predator-prey dynamics. So how do humans interact with this? Well, there's a delicate balance between prey and predator populations. There's a natural check and balances that's already put into place, and humans can disrupt this. We disrupt it a lot of times by hunting and trapping. This will affect the actual system. So an example, farmers and ranchers, they're getting really upset with the amount of coyotes in the area. And so they kill the coyotes so that the coyotes don't kill their cattle. Okay? But this creates a problem for the farmer because the coyotes, not only do they maybe affect your cattle, they also eat mice, rabbits, and prairie dogs. So if you kill all the coyotes, the mice, rabbits, and prairie dog populations all go up. And we start to see that then we don't have the coyotes to help take that population back down. So this means that rodent population will increase, which then ultimately destroys the grazing land that the cattle would use. Again, though, injuring the cattle and making it die. So what do you want? A couple of cattle that might get attacked by coyotes, or do you want a pest problem that affects the whole grass area that your cattle would use to feed on? Right? So human interaction is normally not the best in these cases. Another thing that affects how well a predator and a prey interaction takes place is an anti-predator defense. We talked about how predators tend to have a type of ability to capture and subdue their prey. It might be speed, it might be stealth, it might be camouflage. But we see that prey also can come up with ways to help them against the predators. So just as the predators are adapted at catching the prey have structural and or behavioral adaptations or strategies they use to avoid getting caught. Okay? Now, this also includes plants, guys. Plants are technically prey. Predators are going to be those who eat those plants. And so plants sometimes come up with other types of defenses because they can't run away. They can't pick up their roots and move to a new area. So what they have to do is they have to produce chemicals. These chemicals could be poisonous to the animal. They may also have some physical types of structures like needles and thorns that may help protect them. right? But these are known as anti-predator defenses. So let's look a little closer at some of the ones that other animals have in this group. So we have camouflage. Camouflage is the concealment or the hiding that can take place. So walking sticks looking like sticks or twigs, anglerfish being found at the bottom of the ocean, tricking that area so that they can get their prey. Moths looking like the bark of the tree. Another one we can see is warning coloration. A lot of times the bright colors are associated with being poisonous, like red, orange, yellow. They are telling you to avoid them. They're bad for you. So poison arrow frogs are very brightly colored. A lionfish has the bright colorization. Another one is fright. Fright is when it confuses and or startles the individual, like a porcupine or a pufferfish. Vigilance is safety in numbers. This is where the organisms live in a flock or a school or a herd, and they help to protect each other, hopefully confusing the predator. So guys, predation is going to drive the evolution of what characteristics you see. Predator adaptations are going to evolve to be able to locate and subdue prey. Whereas prey adaptations are going to focus on eluding, staying away from the predator, and defending themselves. So predation provides a strong selection pressure on both the prey and the predator. So some of these types of adaptations could be the development of horns, speed, certain colorations, spines, thorns, and even toxins. All right, so that's what we're looking at. So closer look at some of the defense mechanisms. Take a look here at the camouflage. Camouflage gives the organism cryptic color where it blends in. It makes it harder to see. Now, not impossible, but harder to see. So you have the whippoorwill that you can see here, a lizard, a toad, a frog, and another lizard. All right, so take a look, kind of see if you can find the animals. Okay, in these pictures. Now, the further away you are, the harder it's going to be able to tell, right? And so that's what they're banking on a lot of times with their predators. Another thing that we see happening with predator-prey interactions is what we call mimicry. Mimicry resembles one that possesses an anti-predator defense mechanism. So they copy something. They copy something that looks like it would be beneficial to them. So the Batesian mimicry is going to look like another organism that possesses the defense, but they do not have the defense themselves. So they pretend that they do. This example is a fly pretending to be a bee because bees have the defense mechanism, or a Vickery butterfly with a monarch butterfly. And I'll show you a picture of this mimicry in a minute. The next one is the Mullerian mimicry. This one looks like and possesses the same defense mechanism. So they have similar coloration, they look similar, and they also act similar. So they have the ability to sting you like we see with bumblebees and yellow jackets. Or they have the ability to make you sick with the queen butterfly and the monarch butterfly. All right, so that's known as Mullerian. So a little kind of comparison is to compare the king snake to the coral snake. This is known as Batesian mimicry because one is poisonous and one's not. Well, how do you know? Well, there's a little saying that comes along with this, and I'll show you a picture at the end of this PowerPoint to kind of sum it up. But it says, red next to yellow will kill a fellow, but red next to black, venom lack. This little saying tells you which one is dangerous and which one is not, based on their coloration. So the first type of mimicry here is the Batesian mimicry. This is where there's an actual species that is harmless. It's not actually going to really hurt you. That's going to mimic a harmful species. They're going to model their body and how they act off of that. We see this in our community with rattlesnakes and bull snakes. The rattlesnake is poisonous and the bull snake is not. However, a bite from either one of them would hurt. Another example is shown here with the hawk moth larva. This larva is like a kind of like a caterpillar, and what it does is it blows its body up to look like the face of a green parrot snake or a snake in general. And they'll do this on a branch where the branch looks like their body. Okay, so they puff up to where they look like a poisonous snake. However, they are not poisonous. Another one here is the Batesian mimicry with the poisonous monarch male butterfly and the vicary male butterfly. Vicary male butterflies are edible. They're not poisonous. And guys, the coloration, if you'll notice, is very, very similar. The difference is pointed out. On the monarch male, there's this special dot on their wing, whereas the vicary male does not have that. So here's like a little quiz. So if you look here, we have a fly versus a bee. Which is the fly and which is the bee? Okay, they would look similar. If you look at their bodies, they look similar. And you'll also see that their coloration is similar. But if we take a look here, the fly has the bigger wings versus the bee having the smaller wings. Another example is which one is the moth and which one is the bee. Now this one's a little easier because of the wings. The wings give it away better than the other one. So if we look here, we have the moth and then we have the bee. So this is known as Batesian mimicry. One is dangerous, the other pretends to be dangerous. We then have the Mullerian mimicry. Mullerian mimicry is when two or more protected species look like each other. This is kind of like a group defense in order for us to learn it quicker. Like in this case, black and yellow is dangerous. Stay away from a flying insect that's black and yellow because they probably have the ability to sting you. So you want to stay away from them. And so this is example with the cuckoo bee and the yellow jacket. Okay, and so this allows us to kind of learn quicker to avoid these guys. Now, you will notice that common warning colorations that are present are things like red, orange, and yellow. And we use this too in our own society. Red means stop or danger. Don't go there. Okay, orange and yellow are more like a warning of like, hey, this could be dangerous. Slow down. Don't go any further because it's going to cause more damage or problems. So we use these colorations within our society, and animals use them as warning signals as well. And you can see it here in these pictures where they're using the red, the yellow, and the orange. All right, so going back to our example, when we talked about our snakes, this is what we're looking at for the mimicry. We have the two types. Now, to be honest, I'm not going to do my little saying and be like, the idea of red next to yellow will kill a fellow. I'm not going to worry about that because I'm not going to get close enough to these snakes to tell. They're snakes. I don't want to be close enough to them. All right. But in this sense, we do see that one of them would be poisonous and the other one not, but their coloration is similar. It's not exactly the same. Okay. But it is similar. So red to yellow will kill a fellow, whereas red on black, venom lack. Okay. And so this is just giving you an idea of the type of mimicry, which we would call Batesian mimicry. All right, so this finishes up part 1. So if you have any questions, please let me know.